Contrails claw across the frozen sky at 28,000 feet. Four-engine bombers grind forward through flak bursts that bloom like black iron flowers. The radio crackles. Bandits, 12 o'clock high. Then they come. A silver shape dives out of the sun, too fast to track. Tracers rip through a formation. A wing shears away. A Mustang rolls inverted and chases. Over the Pacific, a Zero twists inside a turning fight so tight it seems to defy physics. Over Stalingrad, a German fighter claws upward through smoke and ice. 6 aircraft. 3 legends. 3 disasters. Some saved nations. Some bled their pilots dry. History remembers the victories. It forgets the failures. But in the violent mathematics of air combat, the truth is far less romantic. And it begins in the sky. The air smells of cordite and burned oil. At 20,000 feet over the English Channel, a formation tightens instinctively as flak bursts stitch black scars across the sky. Oxygen masks frost at the edges. Gunners squint into glare. A squadron leader's voice cuts through static. Hold formation. Escorts inbound. But sometimes they weren't. In 1942, bomber crews flew into Europe knowing that once they crossed a certain invisible line, they were alone. German interceptors climbed through cloud layers like sharks through dark water. Engines howled at combat power. Sunlight flashed across canopies. A split second of reflection, then cannon fire. Metal shredded. Men fell. Over the Pacific, a different geometry unfolded. Blue sky. Blinding light. An American pilot hauled back on the stick, sweat stinging his eyes as a Japanese Zero curved impossibly tight behind him. The horizon spun. Altimeter unwound. The difference between victory and flame measured in wing loading and turn radius. On the Eastern Front, winter devoured everything. Aircraft clawed into frigid air so cold it cracked hydraulic lines. German and Soviet fighters collided above burning cities, their exhaust trails mingling with artillery smoke rising from below. Different theaters. Different enemies. Different machines. But the same ruthless equation. Speed versus climb rate. Firepower versus weight. Range versus maneuverability. Every nation believed it had built the ultimate fighter. Some were right. Some were catastrophically wrong. And history tends to compress that complexity into simple legends, the best, the worst, the unbeatable. But air warfare is never that simple. The best aircraft were not invincible. They bled. They stalled. They fell from the sky in spirals of flame. And the worst? Sometimes they fought with courage that engineering could not support. Because in the end, a fighter plane is more than aluminum and rivets. It is doctrine. It is industry. It is fuel supply. It is the training hours of a 19-year-old pilot staring down his gun sight for the first time. 6 aircraft stand at the center of this truth. 3 reshaped the air war. 3 revealed the cost of miscalculation. To understand which were truly the best, and which nearly doomed their pilots, we have to strip away nostalgia and look at the sky the way the pilots saw it. Through gun smoke. Through vibration. Through fear. And through cold, mechanical reality. By 1943, daylight bombing over Germany was a slaughterhouse. American bombers could reach Berlin, but they couldn't survive it. Earlier escorts lacked range. Crews called it the long walk home once fighters turned back. The air war demanded something revolutionary. The answer came with a British engine modification, the Packard-built Merlin, transforming the Mustang into a high-altitude Predator. Technical advantages. Speed, 437 miles per hour. Range, over 1,600 miles with drop tanks. Armament, 6.50 caliber Browning machine guns. High-altitude performance unmatched in Europe. It wasn't just fast. It could stay. Combat story. March 6, 1944, Berlin. Mustangs escorted bombers all the way to the target and back. Luftwaffe interceptors rose expecting another easy harvest. Instead, they found American fighters waiting. Dogfights erupted at 25,000 feet. German formations shattered. The escort gap was gone. Enemy perspective. Luftwaffe pilots began calling them little friends, bitter irony. Because once the Mustang appeared, survival odds plummeted. Strategic impact. The P-51 didn't just win dogfights. It broke the Luftwaffe's back. Keycap 2 The Turning Phantom, Supermarine Spitfire historical context. Britain stood alone. The Luftwaffe sought air superiority before invasion. Radar stations detected incoming raids. Squadrons scrambled. The Spitfire climbed. Technical advantages. Elliptical wings for exceptional lift. Tight turning radius. Top speed, 360 to 400 plus mph depending on mark. 8.303 machine guns, early variants. It was built for maneuver warfare. Combat story. September 15, 1940. Spitfires intercepted Bf-109s over southern England. At 15,000 feet, turning fights spiraled downward in smoke and vapor. The Spitfire could outturn its German rival. Minutes mattered. So did angles. Enemy perspective. German pilots respected it. Some feared it. It matched them move for move. Strategic impact. Without the Spitfire, and its stablemate, the Hurricane, Britain might have fallen. Air superiority never came. Keycap 3, the jet that was too late. Messerschmitt Me 262 historical context. Allied bombers darkened German skies daily. The Reich needed a miracle. The Me 262 was that miracle. Technical advantages. Speed, 540 miles per hour. For 30 million Malawian kwacha's 108 cannons. Devastating bomber-killer firepower. Nothing piston-driven could catch it. Combat story. October 1944. A Me 262 streaked through AB-17 formation, firing once. One burst. One bomber exploded. It could attack and disengage before escorts reacted. Enemy perspective. Allied pilots were stunned. It just disappeared, one wrote. Strategic impact. Had it arrived earlier, and in numbers, the air war might have shifted. But fuel shortages. Pilot training gaps. Hitler's interference. Too little. Too late. The worst one, the flying coffin. Brewster F2A Buffalo historical context. At the war's opening in the Pacific, this was frontline equipment. It shouldn't have been. Technical weaknesses. Overweight. Poor climb rate. Underpowered engine. Vulnerable structure. Combat reality. 1941 to 42. Against the Zero, it was outclassed in speed, maneuverability, and climb. Pilots in Malaya and the Philippines were massacred. Enemy perspective. Japanese aviators considered it easy prey. Strategic impact. It forced rapid American redesign priorities. Painful lessons. Paid in blood. Keycap 2, the underarmed defender. Curtiss P-40 Warhawk historical context. Widely used early in the war. Reliable. Rugged. But flawed. Technical reality. Limited high-altitude performance. Inferior climb compared to Bf-109 and Zero. Effective mostly at low-medium altitudes. Combat story. Flying Tigers, 1942. They adapted tactics, diving attacks. Boom and zoom. Avoid turning fights. Skill compensated for engineering limits. Enemy perspective. Respected in a dive. Avoided in vertical engagements. Strategic impact. A stopgap fighter. Not dominant. Not disastrous. But never the best. Keycap 3, the overhyped heavy, Bell P-39 Airacobra historical context. Innovative design. Engine behind the pilot. Nose cannon. It looked futuristic. Technical problem. Its turbo supercharger was removed in production models. High-altitude performance collapsed. Combat story. In the Pacific and Europe, it struggled above 15,000 feet. But in Soviet hands on the Eastern Front, at lower altitudes, it found purpose. Enemy perspective. German pilots encountered it mostly in low-altitude ground battles. Strategic impact. A mismatched design for its original theater. Redeemed, but limited. What separates the exceptional from the disastrous is rarely a single specification. It's synergy. The Mustang's long range only mattered because Allied industry could produce thousands, and because doctrine shifted toward aggressive escort sweeps. The Spitfire's agility worked because radar control guided it precisely where it was needed. Even the Me 262, technologically superior, faltered under fuel shortages and fragmented command priorities in 1944 to 45. Meanwhile, flawed designs exposed deeper structural weaknesses. The Buffalo revealed procurement complacency. The P-39 exposed the consequences of altering a design's intended high-altitude role. The P-40 survived not because it dominated, but because tactical innovation adapted around its limits. Air combat is unforgiving. The margin between legend and liability is measured not in miles per hour, but in outcomes. And outcomes shaped the war. Air combat in World War II was not mythology. It was physics, metal, fuel, training. Seconds. The best fighters weren't always the fastest. They were the right machine at the right time in the right sky. The P-51 gave bombers a shield deep over enemy territory. The Spitfire held the line when invasion loomed. The Me 262 showed the future, even if the future arrived too late. The Buffalo taught brutal lessons. The P-40 survived through adaptation. The P-39 proved that design alone does not guarantee dominance. Air superiority was never about a single aircraft. It was about momentum, industry, innovation, pilot skill, logistics, timing. In the end, the sky chose no favorites. It rewarded preparation. It punished weakness. And somewhere above Europe, above the Pacific, above Russia's frozen fields, 6 machines wrote their verdict in vapor trails and burning wreckage. Some became legends. Others became warnings. But all of them shaped the war in the air and the world that followed. Because in the silence after the engines fade, history still echoes at 30,000 feet. When the war ended, many of these aircraft were scrapped, melted down, or pushed into desert storage yards where wind sandblasted their paint into anonymity. But their influence did not disappear. The lessons learned in their cockpits transformed aviation forever. Long-range escort doctrine pioneered by the Mustang shaped post-war strategic air planning. The Spitfire's aerodynamic refinement influenced generations of fighter design. The Me-262 proved conclusively that the jet age had arrived, and within 5 years piston fighters were obsolete. Meanwhile, the failures became case studies in military academies. Engineers studied weight distribution, supercharger integration, structural reinforcement. Procurement officers learned that peacetime optimism can become wartime tragedy. Training programs expanded, emphasizing energy tactics, vertical maneuvering, and coordinated formations. Even geopolitically, the air war redefined power. Nations understood that control of the sky meant control of momentum. It meant protecting industry. It meant projecting force across oceans. The Second World War did not just determine borders. It determined the future of aerial warfare. And the pilots who flew these machines, whether in triumph or in frustration, carried scars long after the engines stopped. Some returned home as aces, their aircraft praised in headlines. Others survived knowing their machines had asked too much of them. Courage was constant. Engineering was not. That is the unvarnished truth about the best and the worst. Superiority is contextual. Dominance is temporary. Innovation is relentless. The skies over Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Pacific were laboratories of survival, brutal, unsentimental laboratories where metal met mathematics and young men bore the consequences. 3 fighters rose to define their era. 3 exposed the cost of compromise. All 6 left contrails that stretch far beyond 1945. Because every modern fighter jet, every supersonic interceptor, every multi-role aircraft, carries DNA forged in those desperate years. And if you listen closely, beyond the roar of turbines and the sweep of radar, you can still hear it. The echo of piston engines at full throttle. The rattle of machine guns. The moment when a pilot committed to the attack. High above the earth, where history was written not in ink, but in fire.